Happy first Monday of February, everyone. I am AnnaLee Dragon, the director of the Kinderhook Memorial Library, and I am doing another Monday book talk, which is something we've been doing for close to a year now, which is crazy to even think that I didn't used to do this every Monday, but I am enjoying myself and I'm glad you are too. And this week I wanted to talk to you about Black History Month, which is every February in the United States. And so where I got my inspiration this year is actually BookPage, which is a publication that we receive on a monthly basis. Thanks very much to the friends of our library who provide it for us. And many of you get them in your pickup bags. If you want one, you can always let us know. There is also an electronic version that's available online, so you can read that at any time. I use it to pick the books that I'm going to add to our collection frequently, and many of you read it and request those books, so it works out really well. And this month, I just want to show you the cover. It's called, the cover of it says Black Luminaries, New Books Praise Leading Lights Throughout American History. And so that's the cover of this month's new book page, and it's where I got all of my inspiration for this book talk, because obviously there are a plethora of Black and African American authors that we could discuss. There's so much talent, there are so many things, so I'm only ever hitting a small segment, right? And I thought this month I would, this year, I would pick from what's in BookPage with some that I had never heard of. And I'm excited. There is some nonfiction, there is also some fiction, so there's kind of something for everybody. And there are some I had never heard of, and I'm really excited to read. Many of these are coming out this month, and so they may not quite be available yet, but they're in the catalog that you can place a request for when they are come out in print. When they are come out in print, that's not English. When they do come out in print, they are in the catalog and you will be able to be on the holds list for them then. I also did purchase them all for our collection, although again, there are some lag times in getting new books that we've ordered because of everything going on with the pandemic. So it might take a little time, but you can get on the holds list, and I did order them. So what I'm gonna do is what we've been doing, which is show you a cover of book, and then we'll discuss it a little bit, with the caveat that I have not read all of these because most of them are very brand new. So we will just talk about them some and hopefully get you as excited as I am about them all. Okay, so here we go. So you saw the cover of the first book. It's called The Conjuring Man Dies by Rudolph Fisher. So this book isn't new, which is what I actually found really intriguing about it. This was written in 1932. Rudolph Fisher was a 35-year-old African-American physician and writer, and he wrote this as it was the first known crime novel by a Black American, which I thought was really interesting. So it's fiction, and there's some police procedural activity in it if you're into that, but it sounds really good. He died, unfortunately, the author died tragically young, and so there aren't a lot of other writings by him, and this book has fallen in and out of print a number of times since it was published initially, but it's back in print now, and I was very excited about that, so I ordered us a copy. All of the characters in it are Black, and what was really groundbreaking at the time are the crime-solving police detective featured in it and his forensic expert physician sidekick. So that's really interesting because in the 1930s, obviously there was not a huge number of Black police officers or doctors, and so this was like writing about that in a way that was very aspirational for the time, and he was a physician himself, so that makes sense, right? And so it's about a crime that happens in Harlem in the 1930s, and what they say is, like many books at this time, it's not huge on action, like there's not a lot of blood, guts, gore kind of stuff that we would normally see maybe in a more current crime novel, but it is really descriptive, and they really laud it for its writing about Harlem and the culture there at the time in the 1930s. And it's kind of unique. There isn't much written, especially from the Black perspective, about this place in time at this period in time. So it is it got really great reviews. It's been turned into a play, I believe. So I'm very excited to read The Conjuring Man Dies, a Harlem mystery by Rudolph Fisher. Okay, next book. Okay, so you saw the cover of our next book, which is nonfiction, so we're switching it up a little. It is called The Three Mothers, excuse my look down, I have some notes here. How the Mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin Shaped a Nation. And the author is Anna Malika Tubbs. And she has a background in sociology and gender studies. And so this all kind of happened. She watched Hidden Figures, the movie about the Black female mathematicians that helped with the initial moon landing. And she became inspired by that and started looking into some things and found that the three mothers that she's discussing here were all born roughly 6 years apart, and that their sons were born within 5 years of one another. So she felt like that was an important connective thread with the women that shaped these men's lives. And so she wrote this book, and she discusses how misogynoir, which is the unique intersection of racism and misogyny experienced by Black women. So it's a very unique experience, and she is a Black woman. So I think she is, with this history that she has in sociology and gender studies, is like the right person to speak to that. And so she talks about how these women shaped the lives of these three young civil rights activists, who, went on to change our world in a lot of ways. And so this book grabbed my attention. I'm super interested to read it. And I think it's empowering and enlightening. And it's interesting to think about, you have these great historical figures, but how were their young lives shaped, and who were the people that shaped them? Because clearly there was something happening at that time that brought these three men to such prominence and in the civil rights movement. So I just think it's a really interesting book to be looking at during Black History Month. People who were so profoundly important to the civil rights movement and the women who raised them. And it's one of those things where I find in my reading and my experience, when you get clusters of people that are so influential, not maybe necessarily in this exact way, but like all of the Impressionist painters were all friends and all lived at the same time and there was this great pool of talent. You could say the same thing for the civil rights movement. There was kind of a synergy that happened where these people all emerged at the same time with powerful messages as powerful leaders. So I just think it's a really interesting book, and I'm very excited to read The Three Mothers. Okay, next book. Okay, so the next book that we're looking at, again, nonfiction, it's called 400 Souls, A Community History of African America from 1619 to 2019. And it's edited by Ibram X. Kendi, who was the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, which was hugely popular in this last year in the kind of discussions that we're having around race and equity or lack thereof in our country. And the other editor is Keisha N. Blaine, who was the author of Set the World on Fire. The thing that caught my eye out of all of the nonfiction that's covered in here was this first sentence of the review, which says, if you're looking for a single work that spans the entirety of the Black experience in America, pick up a copy of 400 Souls. This comprehensive meditation on Black history in the United States features 90 noteworthy Black authors and poets ruminating on the last 400 years, beginning with the date of the first recorded arrival of enslaved people from Africa on these shores. So that just sounds like, first of all, just a massive undertaking. And then the editors are both people who are highly respected in this field of discussing Black history and culture and racism in our country. And so, of course, their names caught my eye. And I liked the fact that it includes poetry and not just prose or nonfiction writing, because for those of you who watched the inauguration just a few weeks ago, we saw Amanda Gorman, a young African-American poet who's in her 20s, give this amazing call to action poem. It was just beautifully written, lyrical, powerful. And so there is a lot in poetry that is passed down too, not just text. We talked last week about graphic novels, right? There's all different forms that people share their thoughts, feelings, calls to action through, and they're not just text as in prose, like a book, a novel, or nonfiction even. So there's poetry, there's music, there's graphic novels, there's art, visual arts. So I think it's really cool that they incorporated more than just prose in this book. But it got fantastic reviews, and they have each author reflecting on 5 years in America. So they move through the progression from 1619, with each author getting a span of 5 years to discuss. So again, this one's brand new. It's not here yet. It's on its way though, so you can get on the holds list for it. And I'm very excited to check it out and see who some of the big names are here. And they say that with so many authors and topics represented in these pages, you are sure to gain new insight about every tumultuous period in our nation's history. And as we know, I've discussed lesser known history before, and that's a real interest of mine, is what gets left out of our textbooks and maybe just we didn't know enough about until now. So I'm very excited to pick up this book. Okay, next book. Okay, so the next book is fiction. Again, we're back. I like to go back and forth and give equal airtime to both because I know some of you only read one or the other. So this book is called The Kindest Lie, and it's by Nancy Johnson. And she is an award-winning television journalist who makes her fiction debut with this. So as I've discussed before, debut novels are often my favorites. I just think the authors have more time to bring them to life in their mind and really kind of perfect them. Once they become popular authors, then they have to sort of churn things out. And I just don't ever think they're quite as special as that very first novel. So this one is a debut, and it is set against the backdrop of President Barack Obama's 2008 election. And it's the story of Ruth, a Yale-educated Black chemical engineer who returns to her Indiana hometown, which is suffering from the economic recession, as she searches for the son she placed up for adoption when she was 17. And it talks about she strikes up friendships with a white boy living in poverty and yearning after his mother's love. What I thought was interesting is it's sort of tied to The Three Mothers in that a lot of this novel apparently hinges on two portrayed women who were doing their best to hold their families together. So it's that female element of the family again that we're discussing. So I thought that was an interesting tie to the nonfiction one we were looking at. And it just sounds to me like this is a very topical novel. So while it's fiction, I think it's highly influenced by current events and things that are happening right now, which I always like because someday later on in history, people may not think to look at the works of fiction from that time, but we should, right? Like, just like we're looking at that Black crime novel that I discussed earlier about the police detective, and that was the first one authored by an African-American. I think that it's interesting to look at works of fiction because they are often just as inspired by the environment that they're created in as nonfiction can be. But some people find them more readable, right? So I think it's a great mix of those things. And it just seems like a fantastic book, current, modern, and it talks a lot about financial insecurity, racial injustice, the income gap, a number of topics that we're all kind of grappling with in the United States right now. So it's social commentary, but it's also fiction. So The Kindest Lie by Nancy Johnson. Okay, next book. Okay, so the last book we're going to talk about today is called The Rib King, and it's a work of historical fiction by Ladee Hubbard, Ladee. And it is about a Black man who is the face of a food brand. So in the era of Uncle Ben, Aunt Jemima, Mrs. Butterworth sort of being removed from our popular culture for good reason, there is this discussion. This book is sort of social commentary about a similar situation. So there is a formerly well-to-do white family who is well-intentioned, but far from being, as they put it, paragons of enlightenment. So they have an overlooked kind of butler who they ask, and he agrees to be the face of their brand of meat sauce, like rib sauce. And so that's where he gets the name The Rib King from. This author has won the Hubbard won the Hurston Wright Legacy Award for debut fiction in 2018. So the book is supposed to be excellently written. It takes place, the first half of it, near the beginning of World War I, and it does flash back and forward a little according to the description here. And it's a depiction of a shadow economy bracketed by race that's compelling, insightful, and reminiscent of playwright August Wilson's finest work. So all of these things are to say that it has a lot to say about our history and our race relations and economy and all of those things. But the thing that really got me about this one is that Book List says that the ultimate reason to read The Rib King is not its timeliness or its insight into politics or Black culture, but because it accomplishes what the best fiction sets out to do. It drops you into a world you could not otherwise visit and makes you care deeply about what happens there. And I think that is such a beautiful way to put what the power of fiction is. For those of you who are not big fiction readers, I think the thing that fiction gives us is empathy for other people. It allows us to put on someone else's shoes in a way that we can't in regular life and really try to understand what it's like to be somebody dealing with vastly different circumstances than what we deal with. And out of empathy comes change, right? When we can empathize and understand what someone is going through, that's where change happens, and that's where hearts and minds are changed. So I think that power of fiction is huge, and I really wanted to recommend this book because of that that sentence that encapsulates that the best thing about it is it just gives us a chance to view a period of history through different eyes that we might not have had the chance to, which is my favorite part about books. And the transporting you too, right? Who doesn't want to be transported somewhere else right now, mentally at least? We can't physically go anywhere, but we can at least mentally think about it. So that's the last book I wanted to discuss today. We're, again, celebrating Black History Month and the wide canon of authors. Hopefully these offer you some new ideas, people that maybe you haven't read before, that will give you a new chance to discover something fantastic. If you ever have questions or if there's anything I can do for you, please don't hesitate to ask. We're here at the library doing appointments and curbside service and all sorts of activities. So check our website, our Facebook page, and give us a call if there's any way we can help. Okay? I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye, everyone.